On June 12, 2025, a state-of-the-art Boeing 787 Dreamliner takes off for what should be a completely routine flight, but just moments later, it tragically falls from the sky. Today, we're going to dive into the official preliminary report from India's Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau to really understand what went so horribly wrong on Air India Flight 171.
This was the last thing air traffic control ever heard from the crew. A desperate cry for help that came just moments before the aircraft was lost. For investigators, the question was immediate and urgent. What on earth could have happened to trigger this call, just seconds after a perfectly normal takeoff?
The human cost of this is just staggering. All 241 souls on board, that's 230 passengers and 11 crew members, were lost. And tragically, the plane crashed in a populated area, leading to another 19 deaths and dozens of injuries on the ground. It's an absolutely devastating loss of life.
You know, we need to be clear here. This was not some old plane with a questionable history. Flight 171 was a scheduled flight on a Boeing 787-8, one of the most advanced, modern airliners flying today. The catastrophe happened right during the initial climb-out, the moment the plane should be at its most powerful and secure.
The crash site itself was an enormous challenge for investigators. The plane came down less than a mile from the end of the runway, right into a medical college hostel. It just tore through buildings and scattered debris over a massive area. Imagine arriving on that scene. It's a harrowing and incredibly complex puzzle to even begin to piece together.
And solving a puzzle like this, it takes a massive international effort. Of course, India's AAIB took the lead, but they were immediately joined by a global team of experts. You've got the NTSB from the US, since that's where the Boeing was designed. You have the FAA, the American regulator. Even the manufacturers, Boeing and General Electric, are there. And because British citizens were on board, the UK's AAIB also joined the team. This kind of collaboration is just absolutely essential to get to the truth.
In pretty much any modern crash investigation, the key lies inside this little box, the flight recorder, or what everyone calls the black box. Now, the 787 actually has two of them. They capture hundreds of different flight parameters, plus every single sound from inside the cockpit. They are, for all intents and purposes, the indestructible eyewitness.
But finding that witness became its own little drama. The recorder in the tail of the plane, the aft unit, it was found pretty quickly. But it was just so badly damaged by the impact and the fire that, well, the data was gone, lost forever. For 3 agonizing days, the investigation just hung in the balance. And then, finally, a breakthrough. Deep in the debris, they found the forward recorder. It was burnt, covered in soot, but the most important part, the hardened memory, was intact. They got the data. The eyewitness was found.
And this is what it revealed. Let's just walk through these final 32 seconds. At 8:08 and 39 seconds, the plane lifts off the ground. Just 3 seconds later, both engine fuel switches move to the cutoff position. 5 seconds after that, the engines are starving and the plane's emergency power unit, the ram air turbine, automatically deploys. The crew is frantically trying to relight the engines. Then comes that mayday call, and 6 seconds later, the recording stops. It's a complete catastrophe, all in just over half a minute.
So everything, unraveled from this one single unbelievable event. The data is crystal clear. The fuel supply to both engines was cut off at the exact same time, just 3 seconds after the wheels left the runway. This became the absolute heart of the entire investigation. Why? How did this happen? And this is where it gets truly chilling. The cockpit voice recorder gives us this unbelievable clue. One pilot asked the other, "Why did you cut off?" The other pilot's response, "I did not do so." This exchange, captured in their final moments, just completely changes the investigation. If neither pilot moved those switches, what did?
And that question gets even tougher to answer when you look at who was flying the plane. We're not talking about rookies here. The pilot in command was a total veteran, over 15,000 flight hours, with more than 8,500 of those on this exact type of aircraft. The co-pilot was also incredibly experienced. The idea that either of them would make such a basic, catastrophic mistake right at takeoff, it just seems almost impossible.
The flight data also shows us this incredible,
desperate fight to save the plane. As soon as those engines failed, the aircraft's own systems and the pilots were working together. The ram air turbine popped out to give them emergency power, the auxiliary power unit tried to start itself up, and crucially, we see the pilots move those fuel switches back to the run position, which starts the engine's automated relight sequence. The data even shows the engine temperatures just starting to rise, but it was too little, too late. They didn't have the altitude, and they didn't have the time to recover.
So this brings us right back to the central baffling question. The pilots say they didn't move the switches. Their experience makes it highly unlikely. And the physical switches, when they were recovered from the wreckage, were actually in the run position, which makes sense with their final attempt to restart the engines. So, what could have possibly caused them to move to cutoff right after liftoff all on their own?
In their search for answers, investigators dug up something really interesting. A document called a Special Airworthiness Information Bulletin, or SAIB, issued by the FAA way back in 2018. It warned about a, quote, potential disengagement of the fuel control switch locking feature on some Boeing planes, and it specifically noted the design was similar on the 787. Now, to be clear, this was just an advisory bulletin, not a mandatory fix, because it wasn't considered an unsafe condition back then. But it points to a potential mechanical explanation that you can bet investigators are now looking at very, very closely.
And it's so important to remember, this is only a preliminary report. The work is far, far from over. Right now, teams are doing frame-by-frame analysis of the flight data. They're doing metallurgical tests on cockpit parts, chemical analysis on fuel samples, all while cross-referencing everything with statements from witnesses and survivors on the ground.
And this quote, taken right from the foreword of the official report, it really is the guiding principle behind all of that work. The one and only objective is to prevent future accidents. It's not about pointing fingers or assigning blame. It's about science and engineering, not about lawsuits.
The loss of Flight 171 is an unthinkable tragedy. And as this investigation moves forward, it leaves us all with a really critical question for the future of aviation. As our planes get more and more complex, more automated, how do we design systems that are resilient enough to protect us not just from the failures we expect, but from the completely unforeseen things that can happen just seconds